everyone, welcome. My name is Katherine Perez, and I'm the Executive Director of the Koala Center for Disability Law, Policy, and Innovation. And we're here today with Tony Coelho, who is the founder of the Koala Center and one of the authors of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and three of our Koala Law Fellows, Kenna, Matthew, and Alyssa. Hi guys, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.
So,
thank you for having us.
Of course, thanks for being here. So Tony, when you decided to start the Koala Center at Loyola Law School, you wanted one of the pillars to be creating a strong pipeline for students to go to law school and then go on and become attorneys and judges. Why was this so important to you?
Well, getting the ADA passed is one thing. It's something on the books, right? But the ADA is only viable if people are interpreting it correctly when cases go through the judicial system. And what we need, I'm a strong believer, what we need is to have people with disabilities on the courts, the state courts, the federal courts, who understand disability and can bring their personal experiences and their personal views to the decision-making process. I think that's critical for those of us in the disability community. And after 30 years, we have a Chief Justice that has seizures, but won't acknowledge that he has epilepsy. But then we have one of the real well-known women who has cancer and so forth, and another one of the female judges who has, diabetes. And so we do have some representation there, but what I'm looking for is I'm looking for some of you to be able to go to law firms that then fight for the disability community or get on the track of the courts where you're helping making decisions in whatever state you're in, but ultimately get to the Supreme Court. And our whole idea at the center is to help you get started and follow you afterwards. And if you want to get into a law firm, you need letters of recommendation and so forth, Kat and I can do that. We can help you get into something else, we can help you. If you want to become a judge, we can tell you how to do it and help you out and so forth. So basically it's us helping you get where you want to go after you leave the program. And I personally think there's nothing else, no other group that does that in the country. And what Kat has done is she's connected with several law schools, just finished a meeting with them, as I understand, with several law schools. And those folks, all from California, as I remember, want to do it nationally and get the whole effort going nationally. And that's what the Koala Center should be about, is how do we make a difference for the disability community? There's a lot of other things we're doing, but that's my primary goal. That's what I'm focused on, and to gain a reputation for doing that. And the Loyola Law School is a perfect place to have that. And having Kat as a professor there, you may not think it's so important, but for us, it's very important that she is there and she's the advocate and she's teaching and so forth. So it just all comes together very, very nicely. But that's my goal. And I went over the time limit, I know.
Thanks, Tony. Kenna, so you were in the first class of the Koala Center Law Fellows with Matt and Alyssa. Could you just explain to our viewers a little bit what the Koala Law Fellowship was like, and maybe share how your participation in the fellowship led to some pretty cool internship or work opportunities?
Sure. So the Koala Center Fellowship really is a year-long program that helped a cohort of students, myself included, also Matthew and Alyssa, really learn more about disability and how to be a person with a disability while applying to law school, while trying to get jobs within law. And so what it started out was with a week-long program that was in person, where we met each other and learned more about our own interests, as well as learn more about the field of law. So we did mock law classes under CAT. We also met with different speakers who are advocates in disability spaces and disabled attorneys. Afterwards, we also then had a year-long but monthly virtual meetings where we all met online and we talked about where we are in terms of our progress, whether we're applying to law school, whether we're reconsidering, whether we're in the middle of, interviews, things like that. And so through the Koala Fellowship, I really learned more about specific ways in which I can really use my disability identity and use that as a strength when it comes to applying it and when it comes to telling my own story. And also, through the help of Tony Coelho himself, I actually ended up securing an internship with the Senate Help Committee, the Health, Education, and Labor Pensions Committee. And through there, I worked a lot alongside disability advocates, specifically focusing on disability policy areas such as healthcare for disabled women, special education, and sub-minimum wage. And through these experiences, I was really able to grow as a professional, but also just learn about specific areas that we as disability advocates need to really focus on and ensure that we all have equal rights in. And so I really think that this fellowship has really changed the trajectory of my life and my career, and I'm really grateful for that.
What's your goal?
My goal, honestly, through listening to you talk a lot, Mr. Koala, it's become sort of more so in the judgeship area. I think I do really agree with you in the sense that we need more disabled advocates and we need them in places of power, where instead of, having disability advocates go into rooms and convince people about why they should care about disability and why it's important, I think it's important to have people who are already in those rooms who care about disability.
That's right. And I just would comment that when we have decision makers or decision body, generally people will talk to you with a disability and say, what do you think, blah, blah, blah. But when they close the door and make decisions, we're not in there. And so making sure that we're in the room when the decisions are being made and we have a voice in the room at that table is the key. And so I fought hard when we did Obamacare, American program, what's it called, ACA, something. But anyhow, Obamacare is what I call it. When we did that, we set up a research unit called PCORI. And the difference on PCORI is the first national research group to make sure that people with disabilities are on the board at the table making decisions. And the important thing with that is that not only you're on the board, but then you can negotiate. So, okay, I'll support what you want, but you have to support what I want. That's the power. And we've never had that before. So now, NIH and ARC, the other two national research groups, deal with disabilities, but you're outside the room. You're not at the board table. So this is the progress, and that's really I want to get from the disability community is get at the table. Be at the decision-making part. That's key. So good for you. I love it.
Alyssa, you were the youngest in our first cohort. Can you explain what led you to apply for the fellowship and what the fellowship meant to you?
Yes, so I actually learned about the fellowship program at another event in which Mr. Coelho was speaking at. It was an event about discrimination within the disability community and laws, that have been implemented for us. So I learned about the fellowship afterwards when I was speaking to Mr. Coelho, and I was explaining to him my passion about becoming an attorney and attending law school and how I have a chronic illness myself. So as we were speaking, he was telling me about this fellowship program that actually was going on at a school in which I was planning to attend to, that I've now committed to, LMU. So then as I was speaking with him, I was like, okay, this sounds pretty interesting. And I found out the deadline was so soon. So I was like, oh my goodness, I need to apply to it as soon as I can. And I was lucky enough to be chosen as one of the fellows. So I was very blessed and happy about that. And I would also say this fellowship has helped me a lot. Not only has it allowed me to learn more about how I'm able to use my disability as a platform and to represent, others within the disability community and how I can use that in the long run, but it also has allowed me to learn about how I'm going to be able to use that while I'm going into the law field and going to law school, and how that will definitely allow me to learn more ways in which I'm able to speak out for others that may be facing similar hardships and discrimination that I am myself and others within our community. So I'm very thankful that I was able to be a part of a fellowship like this.
Alyssa, you left part of that story out, and that you were there with your mother.
Yes.
And I went after your mother to make sure you went to LMU, and kept talking to both of you and followed up afterwards, because I really wanted you to go to LMU. So it's great. I'm happy with what you've done, and just keep up that drive. Get at that table and decision-making area and for our community. Great.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Alyssa, while you were finishing up high school as a law fellow, Matt was finishing up college, and during the fellowship year, Matthew, you were also applying to law schools. And I know you took the LSAT prep course, or a LSAT prep course. Can you describe the issue you had with access and how you dealt with it?
Yeah, sure. So during my time as a Coelho Fellow, I realized through the various meetings and sessions that we had that it was very important that I did take an LSAT course. Just because that on itself just gives you such a big edge on other people applying. So I signed up for an LSAT course, and I notified them that I'm hearing impaired. I told them that I needed to sit in the front of the class, and they accommodated me for that. However, I didn't realize until later on that their online component, a couple weeks into their online component, which is basically you just watch videos to prepare for the lesson of the next day. So a pretty crucial part of their program was not captioned. They only had captioned, the first week or two, and after that they didn't do anything. So after emailing both my professor in the program and also other people, they were very kind of just ignored my requests, and I was kind of really frustrated. I didn't know what to do, so I reached out to Kat at the Koala Center and asked her for some advice, and she helped me get in touch with some nonprofit organizations, which helped me get a letter of support to the program. And they were still kind of hesitant. They said that it was not their priority to give me captions, and they said that they didn't have the capacity to give me captions, something that, as far as I'm concerned, a robot can do with a phone. Finally, within a week of me taking the LSAT, they told me, okay, we'll give you a couple. We'll give you out of the 20 classes, we can give you 5 captioned. Which ones do you want? So although I was really grateful that I was able to get those captions, my main goal in that whole exchange was that it would make it easier for someone else down the line that was in a similar position, can then go and say, hey, I need captions on this X, Y, and Z. And they can say, oh yeah, I remember that one guy that was really annoying and wouldn't leave us alone. We actually had a couple of those transcribed. And, is it wrong that they, kept digging their feet in? Absolutely. I'm a firm believer that in a lot of times when it comes to accommodation and accessibility, the conflict that the organization kind of spews up creates more trouble for them than the person who 9 times out of 10 is asking for some pretty common sense basic accommodations. So to me, that, again, that whole experience, I myself am just very privileged that I had the Koala Center to lean back on and give me these connections. I think that's one great asset that the Koala Center brings to the table for anyone out there who is thinking of, joining this amazing program. And also, I'm just very thankful that the Koala Center helped me advocate and develop my own voice, because I know that before this center and before this program with the fellowship, I don't think I would have had the courage to say, you know what, not only is this wrong, but I think you're violating my rights. So to me, it was a very powerful experience.
Yeah, and understand that I really believe in speaking to power. I don't, if it's an organization, an individual, whatever it is, and I think it's important for us to say what we really feel. I mean, I won't go through the long story, but when the church, Catholic Church, said I couldn't be a priest, when I got into Congress, I had an opportunity to go to the Vatican to meet with Pope John Paul, now St. John Paul, but meet with him. And after my very boring speech pre-approved by the Vatican and State Department, I said to him, Your Holiness, I cannot live with myself if I didn't say something personal. As a young man, I decided I wanted to become a Catholic priest. And I was denied entry because canon law, established in 400 AD, said that if you have epilepsy or possessed by the devil, you can't be a priest. I think that's very unchristian of our church, and I wish you'd look into it. Then I sat down. He gave his very boring speech. At the end, he walked my wife and I to the door at the Vatican. He turned around, blessed her, did not bless me. As a Catholic, that means I'm probably going straight to hell. So I was concerned about it. He turned around and left. 2 years later, canon law was changed to permit people with epilepsy to become priests. I don't take credit for that. I know what I did. The record is there. They may have changed it for some whatever reason, but I wasn't afraid to speak to the Pope to tell him what I thought was wrong. I've done it with several presidents on different issues, but that's the attitude that you have to take, each one of you, is that speak up like you did. You get things changed. You're not only helped yourself, but you're going to help a lot of people that follow in your footsteps that need it. That's what this program's all about. So thank you.
Tony, I love that story. Okay, so Tony, you obviously come from a different generation than these students. You were part of the generation fighting for basic access to the most common of settings. We didn't have curb cuts back then, and it was your generation who fought to get those in. And this generation of students and leaders have always grown up with the Americans with Disabilities Act. They've always lived in a place with curb cuts and places that are more accessible to people with disabilities. But when you were crafting the ADA, did you ever think that it would be used to help disabled students gain access to and excel in higher education as what we're trying to do here with the Koala Center and as all these students are mentioning that they're advocating for?
No, I did not. And I think the interesting thing about the ADA is that now it's the law of the land in over 50 different countries. It's not exactly what we adopted, but in effect, there are over 100 countries that are paying attention to the disabled folks in their country in different ways, but that's what happened. I never thought that it would impact any other country besides ours. Secondly, we were very interested in the time in making sure that we had access in regards to everyday life, like the curb cuts. You know, who uses a curb cut? Go to a city intersection and watch who uses a curb cut. Yes, it's people who use a wheelchair. Yes, it's mothers and fathers who have their babies in a rollerboard. No, roller what? What am I? A cat, help me.
A stroller. Took me a minute too.
Okay, I got it. That their baby's in a stroller. And then it's also delivery men and women who are taking goods to the stores on the street. And so the curb cut has become an accommodation for much more than those of us with disabilities. Take your iPhone, if you have one, or any phone to a great extent. Apple has built into the design accommodations for us. And that's what we want. We don't want the accommodation after it's done. We want people to understand that when they're designing something, it should include those of us with disabilities. Right now, I'm fighting in regards to the websites. 92%, 92 plus 1 actually, percent of the websites are not accessible for our community. 92.1%. And that they are covered now by the ADA based on an appellate court who ruled against a pizza company saying that, yes, your website has to be accessible. Then they appealed it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, we agree with the appellate court and dismissed the case. So the law now, ADA, does cover websites and the internet. But getting it done is making it work is difficult. There were over 2,000 lawsuits in 2019, and there are a bunch now in 2020. So what I'm trying to do right now, and it looks like I'm succeeding, is that I'm trying to get it into the platform of the Democratic Party so that it says that the websites need to be accessible for everybody, including those of us with disabilities. I'm also trying to see if I can get it in this emergency COVID's bill. I don't know if I can do it, but with COVID's, everybody sees what accessibility to the internet, how important it is. People with disabilities and people without disabilities. But those of us with disabilities, if the website is not accessible, we get damaged, we get hurt, we can't get the access we need. That's wrong, totally wrong. We have to change that. So that's what we're working on. But those are some of the examples. We never thought about it then because the internet, if you take 30 years ago, it was not much. Al Gore hadn't come along yet. No, I'm kidding there. But basically, it wasn't the same. And now it is like the interstate highway, in my opinion, and that it's the only way that you can get things done now is to go on that highway of the internet and deal with it. And it's part of American commerce, which is what the ADA says has to be accessible. I get excited as you can tell.
And we're glad that you do, Tony. So Kenna, you've been a leader in access to higher education for people with psychiatric disabilities. Can you tell us a little about your advocacy and your academic work in this area?
Of course. So for me, a lot of my undergraduate experience has really been marked by my role in student advocacy. I think just arriving on campus, I've developed friendships that were very, very core to my being and very, very dear to my heart. But it broke my heart when I started to recognize that both myself and a lot of my friends were experiencing difficulties around psychiatric health, and we were not able to get any support for that. And what that means is even though the university did have their counseling center, a lot of students, specifically students who are psychiatrically disabled, who have longer term needs, were the students who were being referred off campus where they really couldn't afford mental health care. And because of that, I started recognizing the sort of difficulty in that. And I knew it wasn't right because what resulted was really a lot of students, a lot of my friends actually ended up dropping out or taking medical leave. And so the university did approach it with the idea that, oh, you know, if you're not in a place right now to pursue your education, it's okay to take a break and come back and do it later, which I definitely support wholeheartedly, and I think it's true. However, in the case of some psychiatric disabilities, a lot of times there isn't a better point to really seek, help and get better and then wait for yourself to be in a place where you can actually do that. And so because of that, a lot of students with psychiatric disabilities ended up having their education disrupted or simply just discontinued because of their psychiatric disabilities, which again wasn't right. A lot of work that I did was really around trying to ensure that there was university movement around this. So I ended up creating the Student Mental Health Fund, which essentially subsidized costs for students who were trying to seek mental health care off campus and couldn't afford it. Although we didn't have, a lot of money behind it initially, we have now gotten to the point where the university has been able to subsidize $15,000 for the program annually. So it is a continuing program, which I'm very proud of and very thankful for. Although I'm no longer a student on campus, I think along with what Matthew was saying, it was important to me to really ensure that this was something that I fought for, because I wanted to make sure that students who came to this school after me were able to access their education in a way that's fully within their rights, and not have that be disrupted simply because of their psychiatric disability. On the academic side, I've actually written my thesis to explore this further. So I looked at specifically the role of the ADA and how it played in ensuring that students who had psychiatric disabilities specifically had their education discontinued simply because of the horrible access around their existing counseling centers, and what that could look like in a legal setting, specifically if students were to sue their universities to ensure that they actually got access to adequate counseling care, which they currently do not have now. And I think that's something that I've been very, very passionate about, and it's all really thanks to the ADA that created that framework for students to be able to advocate for their rights in this way.
Congratulations. As I said with Matt, what's important about what the two of you have done is that you're helping yourself or what you believe in, but you're really setting a stage for people that follow you. You know, that's the way I feel about the ADA. It's the same thing for all of you, is that if you can do something that is important to you, whether it's for you or somebody else, but the people who follow you then benefit from what you're doing, that's tremendous. That's what the fellowship is all about. That's my dream about what all of you folks can do is change the way society treats those of us with disabilities. And that's wonderful. So I applaud you.
Thank you. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to, continue our work in this space as well.
And it might be, Kat, that I should know a little bit more about what happened here, because it might be that I could get the Bazelon Center to do something in this regard, and that I'm very active with the Bazelon Center. I've helped out a lot on the mental health guns issue, and so I will talk to send me something, Kat, or you, whatever. I will pursue that with them and try to see if I can get something developed, and you'll get the credit.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome.
Great, making things happen in the middle of an interview.
Yes.
So Alyssa, you've written about stigma that is attached to disclosing your disability in a school setting. Can you tell us a little bit about your educational experience?
Yes, so I would say my experience in as a person with a disability in the school setting has been difficult for probably as long as I've been in school. I've definitely had very many encounters in which I've seen firsthand how difficult it is to have a disability in the school setting. Personally, I would say one experience that I would say was very difficult for me is when you have substitutes coming into schools. For myself, I had accommodations when I was in school, of course, because of my chronic illness. So I would often have to have, I would say, different things than, every other student would have. So when substitutes would come in, of course, the regular teachers that I had would have to disclose some of that and would have to inform them of the accommodations that I would receive. This was very difficult for me at times because I would see how these substitutes were really not having much of an understanding of accommodations, of the special education system, and really what they were used for and why I was receiving these things. I would say a lot of times my privacy was disclosed unknowingly, of course, because substitutes aren't always knowledgeable about, I shouldn't be allowing other students to see that this student is receiving accommodations. So often I would have other students coming up to me asking, why are you receiving, extra time on your test? Or why are you always in the front of the class? So that would cause social barriers and hardships for myself, because I would feel as if even though I don't have to disclose these things to other students, it puts you in a difficult position socially, having to tell other students about something that you're dealing with personally every day. So I definitely see really just a lack of knowledge in the school setting when it comes to the disability community as a whole. I would say a lot of the policies that are implemented for these schools and a lot of the things that we have as a disability community aren't always really necessarily spoken about thoroughly to these schools. They don't always have an understanding of what we are receiving and why we're receiving it. And often they feel as if they can make changes, even though, there's certain things that we have a right to be receiving. So I would just say I see a lack of knowledge. I think it's very important for schools to continue to educate the system as a whole about why we're receiving certain accommodations. And of course, every student is different. Not every student is going to be receiving the same accommodations, or not every student is going to have a 504 or something else. So I think it's important for schools just to understand that there's differences between every student, and you can't necessarily just generalize every student with a disability together and say that we should be doing this for them as a whole, but individually look at the student and look at their needs and why they should be receiving the accommodations that they're receiving.
Yeah, thank you, Alyssa.
Tony,
I'm going to ask you a follow-up there. Tony, I know stigma is very important to you as a topic. So can you just describe how the ADA fell short of addressing stigma and what we do as advocates to tackle these kinds of issues?
Well, the ADA is a civil rights bill. And just like other civil rights bills, the same thing. I always tell people that, look at the people of color got their rights in the 60s. Are they able to have total access? Are they able to have everybody treat them the same and so forth? The stigma is still there, however you want to call it. Women got their rights in the 70s. Are women able to do everything a male is able to do? No. It's still the stigma that women aren't X. Then the gay community got their rights in the 80s and so forth. And the gay community has the same problem, stigma. I happen to be gay, and so I see it from a gay community perspective and from the disability community perspective. So I say to our folks, yes, stigma is there. It is, in my view, the biggest issue for our community, and that people immediately assume that because of the disability you have, that you can't do X, as opposed to looking at you, listening to you, and realize, my God, she can do or he can do X. It's the other way around with us. And a lot of religions are the problem. A lot of religions don't accept our disability, and that causes stigma. And so while changes have made, as I talked about in the Catholic Church, the Catholic Church and a lot of other churches, do they provide access to their facility? Not really. Do they encourage people with disabilities to come in? Not really. It seems to me that whatever religion you might have or whatever, would Jesus go along with that? No, he wouldn't at all. And so the issue is how do we get people to get rid of the stigma? What it does, it takes you and I to stand up, educate, be firm. And you've got to educate people about what they're doing or what they're saying that's wrong. Like Matt, what you did in regards to the taking the exam and so forth. That is a stigma, right? But you've changed that. And it's the same thing with the others of you that have changed things because of stigma. But stigma is our biggest problem. Now, I have faced a lot of adversity because of stigma. My parents were not supportive. The church rejected me. I was suicidal and so forth, all because of stigma. But I had to come to terms with myself and what I believed in, and I am now aggressively out there. Some people say, don't mention the word stigma. Wait a minute. Mention whatever is wrong. Stigma is wrong. I'm not going to use another word for stigma. It's wrong. And we in the disability community have to be tough, have to be aggressive to try to get it changed.
Thanks, Tony. Kenna, same question to you. From someone from a newer generation, how do you think that we address stigma?
Yeah, I definitely agree with, basically everything Mr. Coelho said. I would say the danger of this is that stigma leads to discrimination. Stigma leads to us being treated differently in the spaces that we are in, whether it's not being able to access, certain test prep or not being able to access education in the same way. It's something that is there that really has just sort of been kind of around our entire lives. And it's sad because, and by us, I mean sort of the younger generation who is born, after the passage of the ADA. The ADA is a civil rights law, and so it does focus on our rights. And now that we have rights, we are able to fight for what we want. At the same time, sometimes I see that the ADA is implemented in a way in different institutions in a sort of very begrudging, tolerated form where it's very much, oh, I have to do this because it's the law. And that's better than nothing.
Yes.
I'm very thankful for the existence of the ADA for that purpose, for that even people who don't really care about disabled individuals still have to play a part in ensuring our rights are upheld. At the same time, when it comes to accessing different spaces, it is very difficult. And so it goes back to how, the Coelho Fellowship is one of those places where I felt fully welcomed and where I felt fully supported professionally, because in other professional spaces, as someone who has a disability, I've often felt people say, well, you can't really do that because you're disabled in XYZ ways. And it's that attitude that is extremely pervasive in our society, in a sense where if you think about how the media portrays, disabled people, if you think about how we consider disabled people, it's either they are, objects to be pitied, and they overcome something, or they're dangerous individuals who should be locked up and put away. And so the idea is that our identities and our personhood is much more complicated than that. And I think disability is definitely a very, very important and core piece in our identities. But at the same time, our society has time and time again refused to acknowledge that. And that really exists in a way where, because of that, we are still having lack of access to education, lack of access to healthcare, lack of access to our full rights. And I think, in tandem with upholding our rights and upholding the law, we also then have to work in this generation to really change the narratives that exist around disability and how we can actually uplift our own voices of disabled people and have us be in the spaces, in the room where it happens, as Mr. Coelho was saying, because we're the ones ultimately that are going to live in this world that treats us in this way.
Thank you. You're absolutely totally right. But I think what we have to understand is that the ADA, being a civil rights bill, in effect says you have a right to file lawsuits. That's really what it's all about. And the Justice Department is where we go, right? The head of the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, for us, is one of the most critical positions in government, because that individual, and during the Obama years, it was Tom Perez, who is now chairman of the DNC, but not related to Kat, by the way. But Tom Perez, basically, as the head of the Civil Rights Division, took action against companies, took actions against cities, took action against states that weren't complying with the ADA. That's how it makes a difference. The ADA can't do that, but the ADA enforced properly can. And so where there is a problem at times, we can pass legislation. Now, the problem with passing legislation, and what I fear all the time, is an amendment to the ADA opens it up to being sabotaged. And I am very careful with supporting any amendment to the ADA. In the last Congress, there was a group that basically tried to gut the ADA, and they got it through the House, but was killed in the Senate. And it's not going to go anywhere in this Congress, and hopefully not in the next Congress. But we got to be careful about what we do to amend. But the Justice Department is our resource. Now, what does that mean? Whoever gets to be president picks the Attorney General, who then picks the head of the Civil Rights Division. So when we think about how we may want to vote, let's make sure that you vote for somebody who's going to set up a system that protects our community. That's, I think, really critical. But this whole area is why the fellowship is set up, why the center is set up, and we depend upon you, all of you, to make a difference. That's what it's all about. I'm trying like heck to make a difference, still am. Kat is trying to make a difference, but it's up to you. All of you here and people who are coming into the fellowship the next time around or the time after that, your goal is to make a difference somewhere, and drip, drip, we're going to get there. And that's the way our society works, is, people standing up, people protesting, people filing lawsuits and so forth. That's why it's so important that you folks are in law schools and you can make a difference. That's what we want.
Thanks, Tony. And just for the record, Tom Perez actually is a distant cousin of mine.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this has been such a great conversation, and we just have a few minutes to wrap it up. So Matt, I want to go to you. You got into law school and you will be starting Syracuse Law in the fall. We are so proud of you. What are you looking forward to, and what apprehensions, if any, do you have?
Thank you. I'm also really looking forward to it as well. I think I'm most looking forward to going to a university, or I guess just an educational setting that, you know, supports me and whatever my accommodations may be. You know, I think when growing up, I think what really made me want to be an attorney, it just, you know, I was always advocating for my rights. And later on, you know, my younger brother, you know, who's in high school, you know, going to his meetings, his 504 meetings, and you know, advocating on his behalf. You know, I always kind of felt like I was bred for this, in a way. And I'm really happy that I get to go to a school that, you know, not only understands that but values that. And I think that, you know, the idea of going where you're valued, not just seen, I think is really important. But when it comes to, you know, apprehensions, I think one thing that I'm kind of worried about is that I don't want to, you know, kind of niche myself in a bubble. I'm really interested and really engaged with disability rights, but I think that, you know, all people with disabilities, you know, they are more skilled and more powerful, and they can do more things than just advocate for themselves. So, you know, whatever it is that, you know, as I go through law school, you know, if I find something else equally as, you know, interesting to me, I want to know that someone won't look at my resume, you know, see all of the work that I've done, you know, in and around disability rights, and say, oh, you know, like, what does he have that can bring to the table? You know, when in a lot of ways, you know, I think, you know, having a disability puts you in a community that is so diverse and touches, you know, every walk of life, every, you know, aspect of society. So, you know, for me, I'm really worried about that. But I think that, you know, with the help of, you know, the friends that I've made at the Koala Center, and also, you know, my soon-to-be colleagues at the Syracuse College of Law, I'm hoping that, you know, I can kind of, you know, keep carrying along the torch, you know, along, you know, with everyone else here, to try to, you know, continue to do my part to make a difference. So yeah, so I guess we'll see how that goes.
Matt, I would give you just one bit of advice. You don't have to be so focused on disability rights for yourself. Obviously, what you've already done is to handle a disability right that was unfair for somebody else. And so what we're all doing is making life better for somebody else. And so I would hope that you would broaden that, what you just said, because you should always, the rest of your life, my belief is, try to make life better for other people, including those of us with disabilities, and not back away from that. I would take, for example, Kat's experience in regards to disability. She's worked on that for years. When we were looking for an executive director, we looked right at that. And she was chosen for lots of reasons, but because of that. I do a lot of things that are not disability related, but because I'm such a strong advocate, people love that, and they think I can be an advocate in another area and be helpful. So being an advocate, strong advocate, helping others, not just for yourself, the key, but being an advocate for others will help you as you go through your life. And so I would just say broaden that a bit. The last thing I'll say is that my oldest daughter went to Syracuse. She loved it. And Donna Shalala, under the Clinton administration, was Secretary of Health and Human Services. And then after Clinton was out, she then went to Syracuse as the chancellor. And now she is a congresswoman from Florida. So Syracuse has a soft spot in my heart, what they did for my daughter.
Thank you. Thank you for the advice as well. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Now, Alyssa, you will be starting LMU as an undergrad this fall, and Tony and I are so glad that we were able to convince you to become a Lion. So as a young advocate, what hopes do you have for disability equity and justice in the future?
I would say, just as Mr. Coelho said, my biggest hope for the future in regards to disability law is to have more representation ourselves. It's not always great having someone speak on disability law when they don't have their own experience, of course. So I think having more representation is really important for us within the disability community to, seek after these things, be educated about policies and everything. Although we have our own experiences, it's definitely important to get into law and be those at the table making changes, because in the long run, they're only going to affect us and the other ones, of course, that are within our community as well. So it's definitely a hope of mine to continue to educate myself as well. Even though I have my own experience, I'm not always aware of what someone else may be experiencing as well. So I think broadening your perspective and just having more knowledge about all the policies and everything that have been implemented for us is definitely very important. Definitely very important to continue to be educated and to continue to seek after our goals of becoming those at the tables making these changes.
Love you for that. That's the right attitude.
Thank you, Alyssa. And Kenna, I'm so proud of you. You're dedicated to going on to law school and becoming a judge, and we're going to support you throughout the entire process. And you've chosen to take a few years off between undergrad and law school. So we wish you all the best of luck in all the work that you're going to be doing. I think it's going to be really beneficial. It's definitely the route that I took, you know this. I'm a big advocate of taking a few years off before law school. Matt, good luck to you. Anyway, all right, Tony, so what advice would you leave these students and all the students who are watching, and this will close us out for our session?
What I would say, those of us with a disability need to be proud of ourselves. I advise people all the time, you got to get to a point where, what I say because of my faith is that I say, I thank God for my disability, because it's made me into a better person. And I've always tried, I'm mentoring a young man now, 25, 26 years old, who got in a motorcycle accident and he's paralyzed from the waist down. And he had a hard time adjusting to that. And so I'm working with him about loving yourself, making sure that you love yourself, you appreciate who you are willing to go out and talk about your disability if necessary. You're willing not to talk about it if it's unnecessary, but that you love yourself enough that you can handle your disability. And as a result of doing that, you impact others. You basically create an atmosphere for others to say, well, if she or he can do X, then I can too. So make sure you understand as you go through life, there are others watching, others with disabilities watching you, and you can help them just by the example of living. And so I love you all. I think it's great that you've been part of the center. Good luck on your careers. Please stay in touch with us. And those of you coming in, it's exciting. As I hope you saw today, it's exciting to be part of the Coelho Center and the fellowship program. You learn a lot, you can do a lot, and Kat and I keep hammering you to do more. So thank you very much for having me on today.
Very true. Thank you, Tony. And thank you, Kenna, Matthew, and Alyssa. I really appreciated this session. And I just wanted to end by saying happy ADA 30th anniversary to everyone out there.
Yeah. Thank
All
you.
right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.